Welcome to the Massachusetts General Hospital Frontal Temporal Disorders Unit Community Forum Friday. My name is Katie Brandt. I'm the Director of Caregiver Support Services and Public Relations for the MGH FTD unit, and I'll be your host today. Today's session is Legal Planning After a Diagnosis of Alzheimer's or Related Condition, a conversation with attorney Patricia D'Agostino. Patricia D'Agostino is a partner at Margolis and Bloom, practicing in the following areas: estate and long-term care planning, mass health applications and appeals, planning for children with special needs, settlement planning, guardianship and conservatorship, and probate administration. Tricia has developed a specialized practice in the area of advising clients how to supplement the cost of care or at home or in an assisted living facility through the use of a myriad of mass health, veterans, and low-income programs. She has presented at the MGH FTD unit's annual Education Day and to the Boston area FTD support group to help families include legal planning in their plan of care after a diagnosis. When Tricia is not practicing law, she enjoys spending time with her young family, is a dedicated CrossFitter, and loves gardening. Tricia, welcome.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
We're so happy to have you. And, I had to include it in your bio that you have been an educator and a partner in our community, helping so many families really understand what should I think about in the legal realm or in my legal part of my care plan after a diagnosis.
Well, it definitely is a scary time, and it can be a scary time. I know that both just from my own experience with aging family and also from dealing with lots of people in the circumstance. So I'm happy to be here, and hopefully I can provide some education that will maybe just make you feel a little bit more educated and alleviate some of your concerns. So I can start by basically just giving you basically the legal landscape for planning once you have had a diagnosis of FTD, or if you know someone who has or close to you. So first, what I'll do is just go through the list of topics that I'm going to cover today, which the first thing is types of long-term care. So what types of care are out there and what might be right for your family or for you? What's the cost of those types of care, and also what are the sources of payment? So how are you going to pay for it, and is there any help out there for the cost? We'll also talk about some essential estate planning tools that everybody should have, and I can also talk a little bit about protecting your home and assets in advanced planning, which may or may not be useful for you or your family, but definitely good information to have. And then we'll also talk about how to find an attorney to help you along the process, and some resources available for you as well.
I love that. That's a great overview.
Okay, good. So starting out with the types of care. So first, what most people want to do when they come to see me is they want to say, I want to stay home, or I want to keep my partner at home for as long as possible. I hope we never have to go down the route of moving into an institution. What does that look like? And so what that is hiring either home health agencies, or sometimes people hire people privately and they pay them individually. Sometimes they hire family members and pay them. All of that is under home care. Assisted living facility would be moving to a facility, but not quite as clinical, the clinical skilled level as a nursing home. So assisted living is more, it's hard to decide when you're appropriate for assisted living and when it's appropriate to go to a nursing home. And so with regard to assisted living, it's mostly that you want to go someplace to live there independently and you need some assistance. So you might need someone to make sure you take your medication every day, or you want your meals prepared for you. But if you need a high level of skilled care, that's when you're looking more at moving into a skilled nursing home. And also skilled nursing facility rather, which is also known as a nursing home more commonly. And then also continuing care retirement communities are becoming more and more popular now, which is when you move into an independent living facility and you buy in, similar to purchasing a home. You give them a pretty sizable down payment, you buy in, you are in the independent living, and then if you need assisted living, you stay there and you move into their assisted living. And if you need skilled care, you can move into that level as well. Those are a lot more expensive, but they can be the right fit depending on your circumstances. One thing I would say is we often get the question as to how to know which is right for you. Can your loved one live home safely? For how long? What services and supports would they need to do that? Is it appropriate for them to go to assisted living? You feel more comfortable with that than moving to a nursing home. You're not sure they need that yet. Usually what I do at that point is recommend that you reach out to what's called a person who's called an aging life care professional. They used to be called geriatric care managers, so you may hear that term as well. These folks are former social workers and nurses, and they know the ins and outs of all these different facilities. They have good relationships with the facilities. They know the types of communities that are out there. They can come to your home and do an assessment to figure out what would be safe and what services you would need to keep someone home safely. So I highly recommend looking into engaging aging life care professional if you do have questions. And I'm going to look down because I wrote down the website. If you need to find a aging life care professional, you could go to www.aginglifecare.org, and that is the website for the trade association that a lot of the aging life care professionals belong to. So just keep that information in case you need it. And then the big question that comes up is, okay, now I know what I'm going to be needing for care. How am I going to pay for it, and what does it cost? So on this slide, I just updated this with Genworth's cost of care survey results for the various different types of care and the cost. So in Massachusetts, you'll see that home care averages around $5,500 a month. Assisted living is about $6,000 a month. And those are really just averages because they're highly dependent on the amount of care that the individual needs. So if you're at home, you need 24-hour care, it's going to be a lot more than $5,500 a month. But this is just what the average person is spending in Massachusetts if they're hiring home care. The same is true for assisted living. $6,000 is the average amount, but if you need more help, as I said with assisted living earlier, when you move there, it doesn't come with a lot of help and assistance, and you pay more for that help up to a certain level. And so $6,000 is the average, but I've seen that go up to $10,000 depending on the level of care needed.
Well, and I think, Tricia, right, families might also hear about memory care assisted living, where their loved one could live in a secure unit for individuals who have cognitive impairment. And you're right, that's where you get that higher cost.
Right, which is often what ends up happening, right, with a lot of folks, particularly with the FTD diagnosis.
Right.
And then the nursing home cost this is again an average about $13,000, but we've seen nursing homes that are closer to $15,000 or $16,000 a month. So all of this I'm sure is overwhelming to you, and probably part of the reason why you're listening to this seminar. So what we try to do is give you some information so it doesn't feel so overwhelming, and provide you with some of the options out there to assist with these costs. So what are the sources of payment for long-term care? So 70%, I think we did this graph so you can see, I think it really hits home how much of this is not paid privately. So 70% is paid by Medicaid, which in Massachusetts is known as Mass Health. And then about 15% is paid out of pocket, so people paying privately just straight from their savings. And about 14% is paid by other insurance. So that's a question that comes up a lot with regard to insurance. So people will come in and say, I have Medicare, I have a Medicare supplement. Does this cover anything with regard to these costs for long-term care? And pretty much the answer is no. So Medicare will cover up to 100 days of coverage in a skilled nursing facility for rehab. And after that, it's private pay. And the supplements don't cover this type of long-term care, home health aides, assisted living facility, nursing home level of care. When you see this 14% of insurance paying for care, that's long-term care insurance. So one thing I do advise clients when they come in prior to diagnosis, if you're doing just general estate planning and you're thinking about long-term care potential needs, you might investigate whether or not you can qualify for and afford long-term care insurance. Because if you can, you don't have to worry about trying to figure out how to qualify for Medicaid or Mass Health or potentially paying privately. That said, obviously, once you have a diagnosis of something like FTD, it's hard or difficult, potentially impossible to qualify at that point. So just food for thought in terms of advanced planning. And Mass Health, in terms of what Mass Health pays for, so 70% of the care, if the person is eligible for Mass Health in a skilled nursing facility, so in a nursing home, the Mass Health benefit is quite comprehensive. The individual would pay their income every month to the nursing home, and Mass Health pays the difference. So it's really a comprehensive benefit when you're looking at a $14,000 a month bill. Your Social Security might be $2,000, and Medicaid's paying the difference. Mass Health also pays for care at home or in assisted living facilities, but it is less comprehensive. So what happens in those arenas is if you're eligible for home care, Mass Health, they'll come out, the agency has folks that will come out and do an assessment and say, okay, you qualify for 40 hours a week of home care, and they can provide that care. But the individual to stay home safely might need 60 or 70 hours of care. So there have to be funds to supplement in most cases. They're generally not paying for 24/7 care at home, although I have seen that happen on occasion. And with assisted living, Mass Health also does provide some assistance there too, but the assisted living has to be in a Mass Health service area and have a contract with one of the programs. So not every assisted living facility in Massachusetts will take Mass Health. That is not true with regard to nursing home care. So 99% of the nursing homes in the state do take Mass Health. I think that's a common myth that people have when they come in. I don't want to go on Medicaid anyway, because if I do, I have to go to this terrible nursing home because only those bad nursing homes take Medicaid, and that's not true. So almost every nursing home in the state does take Mass Health, but that is not true for assisted living.
I'm so glad you said that, Tricia, because I think it's just so important that people hear about the wonderful work that's being done by the staff in those facilities, and they're not looking at the source of payment when they're providing care.
No, absolutely not. All right, so what I thought I would do is just tell you 5 basic documents that are really essential that every person should have, regardless of any diagnosis of FTD or anything else. And definitely if you have a diagnosis of FTD, you want to make sure these are in place. So the first one is a durable power of attorney. This is a pretty basic document in the sense that it's fairly straightforward. You are naming someone to make your financial decisions for you if you're unable to do so. That is critical because if you do not have that and then you become incapacitated and someone needs to do something like access your funds to pay bills, or maybe we're recommending transferring assets to a spouse to qualify for Medicaid or something like that, without that durable power of attorney, then someone has to hire a lawyer like me to go to court and file for a conservatorship. And the time that takes and the money that it costs can be avoided by just simply executing a power of attorney, giving someone that authority. It could be thousands of dollars and lots of time by the end of it. So definitely consider getting this done if you don't have it already. The other thing about the power of attorney is we want to make sure that the document lists a bunch of different powers. So every potential power that the individual may need under the sun, essentially, should be included in the power of attorney. For example, the power to gift assets, to create trust, or to amend trust. These are broad, really a broad power that you're giving to the attorney in fact, but you shouldn't nominate anyone that you don't trust in that role. And also we want to have that person to have that kind of authority to do things like Medicaid planning down the line. So if we are suggesting, for example, that the individual transfer the assets to their healthy spouse at home so that the healthy spouse can purchase an annuity to qualify their spouse for Medicaid, we need the authority and the power of attorney to do that. So I would recommend getting a giving very broad power and very specific powers as well to your attorney in fact. I would also recommend making sure that you have a healthcare proxy in place. That you don't even need an attorney to do. The healthcare proxy, Massachusetts healthcare proxy form you could get from your doctor, and it just needs to be executed before 2 witnesses. This is nominating someone to make your healthcare decisions for you if you can't. And again, without that document, someone has to go to court to get authority to become guardian. And now with thousands of dollars, wasted when it's a form that you could have just filled out for free with your physician. So definitely have that done. And then a HIPAA release is also important. This is a document where you're giving somebody authority to look at medical records and talk to doctors, get information about your care. So if you need someone to make your medical decisions, they have to have the right under HIPAA to review your records and talk to doctors as well. So certainly get that in place as well. And then a will is also important. The will is where you would say who would manage your affairs when you pass away. So who is going to deal with the attorneys, file any final estate tax returns, income tax returns, and make sure your assets get where you want them to go. If you don't have a will, your assets would pass according to the Massachusetts intestacy statute. So in essence, the law will dictate who will receive what. So another great reason to do it is to make sure that your assets go where you want them to. And then a trust, we often use revocable trust for just about everybody. And this is a revocable trust where you would still maintain control, you'd still be beneficiary, and you'd probably still be trustee if you want to be. The purpose of trusts, there are many different purposes. One is to avoid probate and simplify the administration. So again, avoid legal fees. A lot of these documents are just, you pay a much smaller fee up front to avoid thousands of dollars later in court involvement and oversight and delays. With trust, you can also minimize Massachusetts and federal estate taxes. And you can also protect assets or manage assets for beneficiaries that you're leaving money to. So if you have disabled beneficiaries and you are concerned with leaving them money outright, you can leave them in trust, in continuing trust, so that they're managed for their benefit. This is also true if you're leaving assets to a partner who has FTD or a similar diagnosis and you're concerned with their ability to manage finances and to have control. So if you left the assets in trust for them, they're still there for that individual's benefit with someone in control who can manage them appropriately. So for many reasons, and for just about everybody, I would recommend these 5 documents. And in some cases, we recommend some additional documents as well. And I'll get into those a little bit more detail, but this is specifically for long-term care estate planning. So this is when folks are concerned, they have a diagnosis like FTD, they're concerned with, how am I going to pay for this? How am I going to pay for a nursing home? How am I going to pay for assisted living? I can't qualify for Mass Health. I've done nothing. Or I haven't done anything yet. I still have some time. I just got my diagnosis. So what are my options, and depending on the scenario? So in the first scenario, if you come in advance, and what advance is essentially 5 years before you'd need skilled nursing level of care, which is known as the 5-year look back. If you transfer assets out of your name to an irrevocable trust or to someone other than a spouse, Mass Health will say you are ineligible for Mass Health coverage of nursing home benefits for 5 years from the date of that transfer. So that is why the 5-year look back has that term has been developed essentially. So what some people do in that case is, if they are concerned with protecting assets for the next generation, so if they have a second home on the Cape and they want to make sure that that doesn't go to the cost of their long-term care, they may transfer that to an irrevocable trust. And 5 years after they do that, that asset would no longer be countable for purposes of their eligibility for Medicaid. Lots of people come into my office and say, my husband's diagnosed with whatever the case may be. Let's use FTD, for example. I want to put everything into an irrevocable trust because I want to protect it all. And I just have heard this on TV or the radio or from my friend, and I'm scared. And can you do that? So that isn't, and I spend a long time educating them as to why that's not the best scenario for them in most cases. So when you put something into an irrevocable trust, you are giving up the right to be trustee. You're giving up the right to be beneficiary for the most part with regard to everything except for income earned on the asset, which if it's a house is usually nothing. And you're also giving up the equity in that asset. So if you put your primary residence into an irrevocable trust, then you can no longer get a home equity loan on the property to do repairs. If you sell the property, you can't take $100,000 and use it to pay for your care. You can no longer be the beneficiary. So the sole purpose of an irrevocable trust and planning around that is to protect it for the next generation. It is not to protect it for the healthy spouse. So I think irrevocable trusts can be great, and they are a great tool in the right circumstance, but it is not something you need to rush in and put all of your assets into an irrevocable trust, because then you won't be able to use them for your life. So you're not doing yourself any good in that case. So I tell you that just because that's something that I see people come in nervous about and anxious, makes them anxious. So more likely is in the situation, what I would recommend more likely is if people come in and they have a their spouse is diagnosed with FTD and they're nervous. I would talk them probably away from doing the irrevocable trust, because their goal really is that the healthy spouse has assets to live on for their lifetime, not necessarily that they're going to pass all this money on, even though they'd like to do that too. But the person who is scared is the person at home usually. And so in that case, what we can rely on is what's called a Mass Health qualifying annuity. And there's a regulation under the Mass Health regulations that allows the nursing home spouse essentially to transfer their assets to the healthy spouse at home. And then that healthy spouse can use the assets to purchase a Medicaid qualifying annuity, which turns the assets into an income stream. And Mass Health does not count the spouse at home's income, just their assets. So it sounds a little bit convoluted, but it isn't really in practice, and it's a commonly used tool to allow the spouse at home to basically turn their assets into an income stream and get their spouse on Medicaid. And that doesn't require any advanced planning. There's no 5-year look back for that. There is no transfer penalty for transferring assets between spouses. So you could come in, we could transfer assets to the healthy spouse, and then the nursing home spouse could apply for Medicaid immediately. So there's no need to panic, I guess, around that. There are things that we can do under the current law. And not that irrevocable trusts are bad, they are good, and they're a good, useful tool, but not for everybody and not for every circumstance.
Right.
And then another thing that is possible to do for folks that haven't done the advanced planning and might be single individuals with needs in a nursing home. When you're a single person applying for Medicaid, the asset limit is very low. It's only $2,000, which is not much. So one thing that the agency allows you to do is to transfer assets to a pooled disability trust the assets in excess of $2,000. So that trust is available for that applicant's benefit for their lifetime. So in essence, it allows the individual to put some money aside in trust that can be used for their benefit to cover anything Mass Health does not cover, so that they're not truly down to $2,000 in case they don't have someone else or a family member or someone to pitch in and pay for things they need. They have that money set aside. So these are just some ideas and things to think about, just so that you know that there are options out there, and that if you've done nothing, you're not in trouble. You should come and see an OLR attorney. There's probably something you can do. If you've done nothing and you're a married couple, I probably won't even have you do anything. Start a 5-year clock, because I'm probably going to rely on the annuity, depending on the circumstances, of course. But I just stress that because I think that people panic, and you don't need to panic. There are things that you can do if you've not gone and seen a lawyer 5 years before, 10 years before, whatever the case may be. And then there are also some other exceptions. That's the thing about going to see a lawyer. They'll be able to review your family situation to see if there's anything else that might work for you. So as an example, you can transfer assets to a disabled beneficiary or to a trust for a disabled beneficiary, and there's no 5-year look back. So if the family happens to have a disabled child, that might be a way to transfer some assets and create eligibility while protecting that beneficiary for their life. There's also something called a caretaker child exception, which if you have a family member who's lived with a parent and has provided care for them for 2 years prior to their needing a nursing home, then the parent can transfer the home to that child and there's no 5-year look back. So these are just some examples, but there's lots of different things out there that are available. One thing I did put on this slide as well is it is important to see an attorney when you're making these decisions. So don't just transfer all of the assets to the healthy spouse and do it on your own and be done, because we need to take some precautions. If the healthy spouse then passes away and the nursing home spouse is alive, then they'd inherit all of the assets and it would sort of ruin the plan. So we can do things like protect that with testamentary trust for the healthy spouse and things like that. So it's a little bit more convoluted than I'm making it sound, but I just want you to know that there are options out there. And here I just did a couple of slides just to show you a little bit more in detail what we've already discussed, which is options around protecting the primary residence in advance or protecting assets in advance. And this is the irrevocable trust where I've talked already that creates a 5-year ineligibility period. So once you transfer the assets to an irrevocable trust, you have to have enough money to pay privately for 5 years because you will have a penalty period for that period of time. You will no longer have control over the asset or use of the principal. They are scrutinized by Medicaid, so there are lots of trusts that are still treated as countable even after the 5-year period, and we see appeals on that all the time. And obviously the advantages are that you can be the beneficiary of income. So if you have a second home that's a vacation home and you rely on the income, but you're never going to sell the property, an irrevocable trust might be a good tool for you because you can put the home into the trust, still receive the income, and after 5 years know that that would pass on to the children or beneficiaries that you're trying to get it to. And after the 5 years, the house should not be treated as countable by Medicaid. Another type of document that people use to protect the primary residence and they come in and ask about a lot is, should I do a life estate deed? My neighbor did this. They deeded the property to their kids, and what's this life estate deed about? So I thought I'd bring that up for you today. The life estate deed is when you give your primary residence to your children by a deed or to someone, and you retain a life estate interest. That allows you legally to live there for your lifetime. You are entitled to any income on the property during your lifetime. You're obligated to pay any expenses. So essentially, you own the property during your life. But when you pass away, by operation of the deed, it automatically will pass to the kids without probate. So it is a way to avoid a lien from Mass Health and to protect the property in essence for the beneficiaries. The disadvantage is that it will start a 5-year clock, just like an irrevocable trust. So you will have to pay privately for 5 years from the date you did this. So this is one of those advanced planning tools. Also, there's a loss of control because you've added owners onto the property. So if you add your children onto your deed and one of them is in a car accident and is sued, someone may be coming after some of your property. Or if their husband or wife files for divorce, again, someone could be coming after the remainder interest in your property. So there is a loss of control. And also it protects the property from estate recovery. So when you pass away, it automatically goes to the beneficiaries. But what it doesn't protect from is if you do the life estate deed, transfer the property to your kids, and then you go into a nursing home 5 years later, or 5 or more years later, and you're on Medicaid, and the house is just sitting there, the kids can't sell it, because if they sell it, Mass Health will try to recover from a lifetime lien for whatever they paid for your behalf, because you have a life estate interest still. So an IRS calculation will be done, and a portion of those proceeds are yours. So although it protects from estate recovery, the family really does need to understand that they can't sell it, and they will have to maintain it, pay to maintain it for their lifetime until you pass away. So although it has a lot of advantages, there are also some disadvantages. And again, you would want to consult with an attorney before doing any of these things.
That's such a great example, Tricia, of like hearing your neighbor talk about something and then for you to just really explain, these are the things to consider. I love that.
Good. Yeah, no, that's what happens, I think. Like most people come in and they also think I have a trust, so I'm all set. My house is protected. because it's in a trust. I saw a lawyer, they did that. And then we look at the trust, and if it's in a revocable trust, which is what is done for most estate planning purposes to avoid probate, minimize taxes, that's not a protected asset for Medicaid planning. It will avoid probate, but not Medicaid. Or if it's in a realty trust and they're still the beneficiary, it's not protected. So it really, if you're in the situation and you just want to meet with someone to review your circumstances, see if your trusts are the trusts you think they are, educate you on what options are out there, figure out what's right for your family. I really encourage it. Most attorneys will meet with you, review your assets and estate planning, and really give you an in-depth explanation of what's out there for you. So it's totally worth, I think, the time. And if you're trying to find an attorney that does this, you don't necessarily just want to go to any attorney like a general practitioner. And oftentimes a general practitioner will refer you out anyway to what's called an elder law attorney. So you want somebody who specializes in this field. So for example, all of the lawyers at our firm just do elder law, estate planning, and special needs planning. So there's so much to keep up on just this area. You don't want a general practitioner. And how do you figure out if you have the right person? Here are some questions that you could ask if you get the name of an attorney to talk to. Just ask them things like, how many years have you been practicing estate planning and elder law? What portion of your practice is devoted to these fields? Are you a member of the National Academy of Elder Law Attorneys? So that's our trade association, and lots of excellent attorneys are members. There's a Massachusetts chapter, and I think most elder law attorneys that I know are members of that organization, so definitely a good question to ask. Do you charge for your initial consultation? And how do you determine your fees? So you want to get that kind of information up front, and these are all very reasonable things to ask, so attorneys will not be offended by you asking these things before you schedule an appointment, and they shouldn't be. So definitely feel free to ask the questions so you know you're in the right hands.
Yeah, I think especially that question, do you charge for your initial consultation? Because I think folks don't even know, well, how do I know how to reach out to an attorney to find out if they're the right one? So that's a great list of questions that you can ask before you even book an appointment.
Right. And then how do you find somebody? I would say ask friends or family, because just people that you trust, generally you'll trust who they trust. Just it's usually a good circle, trusted circle. Also trusted advisors, so other attorneys that you've used in the past. If you have a general, like I said, general practitioner, so lots of our biggest referral sources are estate planning attorneys. So other people who just do tax planning and other types of estate planning will refer to us. So trust your trusted advisors, including your attorneys, to get you in the right direction. Accountants are great people to ask as well. And financial planners, they usually can help point you in the right direction. Also, I put some websites here for you to check. I think NALA is a great place. elderlawanswers.com is also great, and that you can go on elderlawanswers.com in any state and put your city and town in. It will populate elder law attorneys in that city or town. So if one thing that comes up a lot for us are people calling saying, this has happened, we've got this diagnosis, but our daughter lives in Florida, we're probably going to move there because we're going to need her help. Do you know anybody? And sometimes we do, we can give the name, but not always. So this elderlawanswers.com is a great place to go for that. And also for information, ask Harry info I put on here for information about elder law issues. That's my partner, who's Harry Margolis, and he answers any questions that you put there. So if you have a question, he will answer it. And then I put on here our website. So we have lots of resource guides that we're just trying to get as much information out as we can. And so you can download them and just use them or get as much information as you want. And that's what I recommend doing, is just reading up and getting information. And of this book, Planning Ahead, is a good little sort of summary of the different options out there.
That's great. That's so helpful, Tricia. Thank you.
You're welcome. And I think that,
yeah, I think that's the end of your slide deck. We can be sure at the end of the community forum Friday, we'll put up the resources slide one more time. We'll make sure that we post that. And I think I just had a couple of questions. You know, one was that I loved that you gave the example of how can you plan ahead compared with how can you plan essentially in crisis or in an acute situation? But I guess what would you say to families who maybe are worried that they waited too long, they didn't plan, and now they're afraid because they've heard the stories. I meet a lot of caregivers who will say, I don't want to lose my house and I don't know what's going to happen. And there's so much anxiety. And you just seem to have such a compassionate approach to the topics. What would you say to someone who's afraid to take that first step?
Yeah, so I think most people are afraid to take the first step, and they're just paralyzed by the fear. Number one, their life has just been destroyed essentially emotionally. They're someone they love very much has this terrible disease, and they're scared. And then they're scared about losing their home and their finances. So what I would say is you don't have to be scared. You should just get educated. So find a reputable elder attorney, sit down and give them all of the information that you have about your assets and let them tell you what to do. In most cases, so they're not going to steal your home. Your partner can go on Medicaid and they're not going to make you sell your home. You're not going to take your home. That's a myth. So what happens with the house is if you go on Medicaid, you're allowed to have a primary residence and be on Medicaid, but they'll lien the house for the value of services they pay on your behalf. However, if you have a spouse that's living in the home, they will not lien it. So we would just transfer the house to the spouse, and the spouse can keep it. No lien, no estate recovery. So they're not going to take a house in that situation. And even if you're a single person and you own a home, if you have to go to a nursing home, you can have your house still. So if someone's living in it, they can stay living there. But when you pass away, the house would then have to be sold, and the lien could be repaid. But for couples, they're not going to take your home. And it's when you're talking about protecting it, it's really for the kids or the beneficiaries, not for you. So I would say just get educated.
It's good to get educated because of course that's alarming, right? If you've heard that myth and you think, right, I just heard this diagnosis and now I might lose my home. So I'm so glad that you spoke to that. Good.
Right.
Sounds like it's never too late to walk in the door and ask for help.
Never. And most people, 90% of the time, they have never come in the door before. And we help them create eligibility for Medicaid, protect the assets for the healthy spouse. And yes, it's a process and we have to go through it. And it's hard to, it's a lot of time that you spend with us doing it, but we can do it. Any elder law attorney can. So you're not going to lose everything. You just need to get educated and get someone to look at your specific information and tell you how to work it.
Tricia, the other thing is, of course, an elder law attorney doesn't always work with families struggling with dementia. But I know that in your practice, you've helped a lot of families that are connected with our community. And I was just wondering if you might reflect on how working with families with dementia has impacted your practice or the way that you think about your work.
So for me, a lot of our clients are in the situation where they have dementia, especially our elderly clients. And for me, it's a really enjoyable part of our practice, just for these reasons that we're talking about. Like, people are scared for the most part. And it is scary, and the information on the internet is inconsistent, and the information that people are telling you is not consistent because they don't totally understand what they did necessarily. So it's extremely rewarding work because we can really take the expertise that we have and help families get from A to B, basically, and calm them down.
I love that. And if you had a take-home message today, something that you want everyone to take to heart, what would that be?
I guess it would just be a lot of what I've said so far is just, you don't need to be scared. You have enough to worry about. So worry about what's right for your loved one, how to get the right care that's appropriate by finding like the aging life care professional that can help you figure out what's appropriate for them. How do I deal with this medical part? And how do you take care of yourself emotionally? And then go make an appointment for an elder law attorney and let them be the one to tell you what to do with the finances. So somebody will help you figure that out. We will help you figure that out. Any elder law attorney will, your financial advisor. But just you spend your energy focusing on what the right care is for the person and how you're going to get through it emotionally.
That is a powerful message, and that's one that I would support as well, is, focus on your role as the expert care partner and allow the experts in legal issues to help guide your way. Tricia, thank you so much, not just for your time and expertise today for our Community Forum Friday, but also for all the work you're doing in our community and helping so many families just cope with what can be a really difficult and unexpected situation.
Thank you, and thank you for having me. I enjoy it.
Of course, yes. So the Massachusetts General Hospital Frontal Temporal Disorders Unit is a clinical research program dedicated to providing the highest quality of care while working tirelessly for a cure for these devastating conditions. And Community Forum Friday is a way that we can connect with our community of persons living with a diagnosis, care partners, and caregiving professionals. We are so glad to have all of you here with us, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you.